do we have?
Sure, you say.
Do we have Scott Keeter with us?
We do.
Okay, so let me get Scott on the phone if we have him. And I think Scott's been on the show more than anyone else. Good afternoon, Scott.
Hi, David.
Great to talk to you.
Well, thank you for having me back.
So I want to talk about Scott Keeter's the director of survey research at the Pew Research Center, and Scott has been on the show before elections, after elections, unrelated to elections, and there was a recent study that your organization did which relates to the public perceptions of news network ideology. And this is something we've covered a lot on the show, and we get a lot of our listenership saying Fox News is conservatively biased and MSNBC has a liberal bias, and there's always discussions of, well, does it matter if it's during opinion journalism? Are we just talking about news broadcasts? So tell me, sum up, I guess, if we can, just to get started, this public perception study that Pew did.
We simply wanted to know whether people perceived each of the major news outlets as mostly conservative, mostly liberal, or neither in particular. Now, I should preface, this discussion with the fact that a lot of people in the public don't understand the terms liberal and conservative, and so we get some weird results here that have occasioned quite a bit of head-scratching, at least in the blogosphere. But in the main, the results show what you would expect. Fox News is perceived by a wide margin as mostly conservative. 47% say mostly conservative, 14% say mostly liberal, and 24% say neither in particular. No other network or news outlet is perceived as mostly conservative by more than 14%. So Fox, 47% mostly conservative, and the others between 11% and 14%.
So tell me about this. I would love to meet some of these 14% that believe Fox News is mostly liberal. And so what you're telling me is you think that is related to people not understanding what liberal or conservative means.
That's correct. I mean, it's possible that there are some very, 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 very conservative people out there who think that Fox News is too liberal, but
right.
Mostly I think this is just confusion over what the terms mean.
So when you do a study like this, and I understand that it's the public's perception, it's not any kind of an objective study of what is actually on these channels, do you need to adjust in some way for the political orientation of each network's audience? So does it matter that Fox News has more conservative viewers than the other networks when we look at these results?
Well, it's very interesting. The fact is that Fox News viewers see their network very much the way other viewers see their network. For example, we asked people in the poll, do you regularly watch Fox News? Do you regularly watch CNN? Do you regularly watch MSNBC? And the percentages seeing Fox as mostly conservative rather than mostly liberal is almost identical across those three groups. Regular Fox viewers, 48-17. Regular CNN viewers see Fox as 50 to 16% mostly conservative to liberal. And MSNBC, same thing. 48% say Fox is mostly conservative, 19% mostly liberal.
So when Fox News says that they're fair and balanced, what you're finding is there's actually just as many Republicans or conservatives and liberals that actually believe that, right? It's the perception seems to be the same on both sides.
Yeah, everybody sees Fox News, in similar terms, or at least similar percentages of each group do. Now, one difference that we find is that Fox News viewers do not see the other networks the same way that the viewers of the other networks see them. Fox News viewers are more likely to consider all of the other news organizations as mostly liberal than mostly conservative, or even neither in particular. So they are, Fox viewers see the mainstream media other than Fox News as tilted towards the liberal side. And while it's true that even the viewers of other news organizations see their own news organizations as somewhat more liberal than conservative, the difference here is quite substantial between how Fox viewers see the rest of it and how their own viewers see the rest of them.
Has there been a shift, in your opinion, of conservatives moving to Fox News as their primary news outlet and liberals moving to, according to your study, MSNBC, CNN, NBC? That is Do you see a trend that people want to watch news that is going to be skewed towards the positions they already agree with, or is there something else?
No, I think there definitely is a sorting out of the audiences. We did a separate analysis that looked at partisanship and the audiences, and there's a very clear trend. Over 10 years, for example, the percentage of Democrats who say that they watch CNN regularly has risen from 25% back in 1998 to 33% in 2008. Meanwhile, the percentage of Republicans who say that they watch Fox News regularly has gone from 14% 10 years ago to 36%.
So more Republicans are watching Fox News and more liberals are or Democrats are watching CNN. And I think we probably aren't too surprised by those numbers.
That's right. So there is a sorting out and a segmenting of the audiences. And, the pattern is true even for MSNBC, though they have a smaller audience. For example, 10 years ago, 10% of Democrats watched MSNBC regularly, and last year it was 18%, so almost a doubling of the incidence of Democrats watching. Republicans stayed about where they were 10 years ago. 11% say they watch MSNBC regularly.
So while we understand that this particular study is based on audience perceptions, if you were doing a different evaluation, which is if you were trying to do some kind of objective evaluation of political bias across these networks, what would you look at? Would you do an analysis of how the news is presented? Would you look at the political orientation of the guests or the number of guests? Or would you research political donations made by producers and editors? I mean, what would you look at to take a look at that side?
Well, I think all of those would be possible approaches, certainly analyzing the guests, and even taking the approach that our sister project here, the Project for Excellence in Journalism, has used in their analyses, let's say, of campaign coverage last year. They look at things like positive and negative stories about the candidates or about the president. And their findings, while not a direct measure of bias, indicate differences in tone. Now, of course, those are subject to misinterpretation because people can say, well, Obama got a lot of positive coverage from MSNBC or from CNN last year during the campaign, and more neutral coverage from Fox. But in fact, what that might signify is that there was a lot of good news for Obama last year in the campaign. He was ahead in the polls through most of during the campaign. There were a lot of good things happening to him in terms of fundraising, and all that generates positive coverage. So
right, you have to somehow adjust for reality, right? I mean,
that's right.
Yeah.
If good things are happening to somebody, whether it's a president or a party or a candidate, then the coverage is going to tend to be that way because people are going to be saying good things.